Creativity has been a fundamental cognitive process involved in problem solving and communication. But what is it that makes us pick up a tool like a pencil and mark a piece of paper with a drawing? Are we just marking our existence in a time and place? There are a few ways to look at creativity. We can look at it in a reductionist way, where very few people and very few activities would be considered creative. In this view, only physical works like a painting or sculpture are creative, or a few intangible works like a song, and only eminent geniuses would be considered creative, like Da Vinci or Van Gogh, Einstein or Stephen Hawking. Or we can look at creativity in an expansive way, where almost everything anyone does could be considered creative. Whenever we speak, think, or act, we're being creative. To explore creativity, I came up with 8 questions that I asked a wide range of people, from creativity researchers and psychologists to creatives from all walks of life. Visual artists, musicians, cooks, comedians, and filmmakers. Well, let's delve in here if you think you're ready.
Let's do it, yeah.
All right.
So Andy.
So Jesse, what is creativity?
I think creativity is a force that exists in the universe, a mysterious force that has some sort of desire. It's sort of a desirous force that's moving through the world and moving through us as individuals and communities, and comes with the intention to move us in some way, to get us to do something. And I don't want to skip too far ahead because of course I've read all the questions already.
Spoiler alert.
But I think creativity comes to push us for a reason. I don't know if I know what the reason is for that, but there's definitely something mysterious happening with it, coming into our lives and pushing us to do certain things. And I think it comes to push everybody. Like everybody is in touch with creativity in one way or another. I think, as artists, artists are pushed the most intensely by creativity. But that force is kind of, when you start talking about creativity, start realizing it's sort of omnipresent. It starts to become like a presence or a god or something that's sort of hanging around. And especially if you go into artists' homes, you start seeing it everywhere. It's on the walls, and it's in the food, and it's taking up space. So yeah, I think creativity is a mysterious force.
Absolutely. There's things I want to interject, but I'm like, nope.
Maybe you should interject.
I will interject them in the documentary itself.
Okay, but I also want to hear them just a little bit.
Okay.
I feel like it'll help me feel like, because
Sure.
I did an interview last year or like a few months ago for my music with a friend who has a podcast, and she was really like we didn't get into conversation at all, really. She just asked me questions and then didn't respond. And it was really hard because I was like, because I feel like I feed off of conversation a lot.
Sure.
And I feel like your questions are your questions and quotes that you sent are so interesting. And so if you want to interject and turn this into a little bit of a conversation.
Sure.
And then if you need me to repeat something, I could, that like comes out really well. I could totally repeat it. Like,
oh yeah. So it's easier to edit or whatever.
Yeah.
So, I want to look at creativity. I interviewed a guy who's only like 3 or 4 years older than me, but he's a PhD professor from University of Connecticut.
Yeah.
He and a buddy, like he's a psychologist who staked his career on creativity.
Yeah.
And so he has he calls it the 4C model, because most people think of creativity like big C and little c. Big C is everybody you know of. your Da Vinci's, your Michelangelo's, your Beethoven's,
your
Stephen Hawking's, right? And then everybody else.
Right.
And the
Right.
idea is, well, that everybody else that's too big, let's break that up further. So he and this other guy put two more in. Within little c, they have mini c and pro c. So mini c are like creative revelations that come to you mostly through education, like aha moments.
Yeah.
And that leads to little c, which is kind of everything people do that's creative that isn't Da Vinci, you know. So
Yeah.
cooking, the way you make, somebody might make a floral arrangement, arranging the outfit that you wear on a day. These are all little creative acts. And then that can lead to pro C, which is someone like you or me, where, we're in the field of art and creativity that we want to be in. I'm in visual and education, and you're in music, and we're making money off it. Maybe it's our second job, it's not our first job, but we're doing it, we've done it professionally, but we're not at the eminent genius level of Michelangelo or Picasso or whatever. So so I want to I'm looking at that, and I want to interject that guy's ideas a bunch.
Really interesting.
Also, I have another thing. I'll bring it in later.
Sure.
Let's bring it in later.
Yeah.
So let's go to the next question here. Where does creativity come from? And maybe as a little setup that you can run with or not, is this guy, Paul Zollo. I guess he's a musician as well, but he had a book called Songwriters on Songwriting. This is like from the mid 80s. He interviewed Dylan, and he interviewed the Beatles, and he interviewed Springsteen and everything. But the first person he interviews is Pete Seeger. And Pete Seeger said that many poems or songs have been written while people are sleeping. What do you think about that? You can run with that, or just where does creativity or inspiration come from to begin with?
Yeah. Well, I love that Pete Seeger idea that songs are written, people have received songs while they're sleeping. And it really sort of directly connects to my creative practice as a musician, because I write about dreams constantly, and dreams are constantly inspiring songs. And the images I find there, I'm a really deep dreamer and feel dreams in a really visceral, textural sort of way. So when I gather those images and they make it into my notebook, collecting my dreams, they often very quickly turn into poems or songs, because the images are just so evocative and so visceral. So to me, it makes perfect sense that people would write songs in dreams or receive songs in dreams. And on that note, if we look at the dream world as a sort of mysterious place from which things come, I feel like we're getting close to the origin of creativity in some way. We're getting close to the origin of creativity in some way, because it is, I think people have a tendency to, in popular culture, sort of discussions about creativity, there's this idea that creativity is airy. It's sort of disembodied. It's sort of spiritual in the sense of floating about and not having a sort of corporeal location from which it comes, which is perhaps true in a certain way. Dreams aren't corporeal necessarily. But to me, creativity has such body. Like when you get inspired by something, you are filled with it, and it's completely in the body, and it can drive you crazy. It can drive you crazy if you don't enact it. And that's definitely true for me. Like before we started this interview, I was in the kitchen after having made breakfast, and this song is like playing in my mind, and it's been playing in my mind for months. And I haven't recorded it yet. I've written it. It's all kind of worked out and composed and whatnot. And the different parts that are going to go into it are written. But it hasn't come out yet. So it's just sitting in my body. But it's like I'm living it every single day. So this doesn't necessarily answer your question, where does creativity come from? But I feel like I want to say creativity comes from the other side. It comes from the wine dark sea. It comes from outer space. It comes from places that we identify as being elsewhere, not necessarily readily accessible, but places that we attach a huge amount of symbolic value to, because there's something visceral and
tangible, maybe?
Yeah, maybe tangible, maybe it's like visceral. There's something visceral and extraordinarily alluring there. It moves us. It like hits us. It's very tangible, and it's like the intangible tangible. It's like yin and yang.
Thank you, by the way, for invoking the wine dark sea.
That just hit me right here. I wasn't planning on saying that or anything, I swear.
That's great, though. You know what I just thought of, and this probably won't be in the interview, or at least in the documentary. I may later post all the interviews on YouTube anyway.
Oh, cool.
Because they're interesting. I interviewed.
You can just hear people talk about things.
Yeah, I interviewed a professor from UC Davis for almost 2 hours.
Wow.
And this is a guy who told me he wasn't verbose.
I just happen to be an intellectual.
I'm like, you are a professor.
Things to say.
You like to profess. The idea I just thought of when you said creativity comes from outer space. One of my favorite movies is Contact.
Yeah.
And what if, while everyone's waiting around at SETI, waiting for radio waves to come at us, what if we've already been, we're receiving messages for thousands of years in our dreams?
Totally.
Some other realm.
That reminds me of something Sun Ra says. He says in the beginning of this documentary this guy made about him. He says one day a voice from outer space will speak to Earth. Could be happening now. And he's kind of alluding to himself that he's the voice from outer space speaking. But it's beautiful because it also alludes to exactly what you just said. Like, what if we have been receiving messages the evidence for we've been receiving messages from the place of the unconscious for thousands of years is well documented.
Yeah.
If you're in any of our fields, if you're in the field of literature or history or mythology, it's psychology, it's very obvious that mysterious messages have been transmitted to humans continuously since the dawn of humanity.
Absolutely. So the third question here, do the rhythms and cycles of artistic expression have anything to do with the cycles of the natural world? And I can give you more info on where I'm coming up with that question, or you can just kind of run with it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it immediately brings up so many thoughts. The first of which is just the feeling of being a practitioner of creative work. You have harvest times, and you have seed times, and you have lean times when you're an artist. Sometimes the inspiration is just flowing and the work is just happening and you can barely control it. And other times you're just trying to get started You're just trying to plant some seeds so that something will grow, and you can have something to put that energy into. And other times it's just not there. So that, really reminds me of the cycles of the seasons and the work of growth. And I'm also reminded of something one of my favorite songwriters, Diane Cluck, said, which was, she was in an interview and she said something to the effect of, when I don't have inspiration, when I don't have songs coming, I don't write them. And I'm not being an artist in those moments. And I thought that was a very courageous and exciting thing to share, because I think there is an expectation that if someone's an artist, they are generating all the time, nonstop, and that's all they do. And I think that's something that a concept that allows artists to be taken advantage of too, in terms of like
commercial.
from commercial interests. Like, well, musicians, they're just going to make music no matter what, so they don't really need to be paid a lot to do it. Even though, I'm sure you feel this way too as an artist. It's like you're generating this stuff that's pure magic, basically, and changes people's lives and connects people and heals. And it's worth so much to the general populace, so much, to the point of there's images everywhere, there's music playing everywhere, there's books everywhere, there's TV everywhere, and then nobody really wants to pay for it. It should be free. Strange idea that I haven't quite worked out yet.
Well, my thought is that I think it should be free, but I also think we shouldn't have to have jobs. So maybe when we get a universal income as society,
we are so on the same page about this.
Well, of course, because we're creatives. Everything's based on the work. Oh, and you like to create something? We'll do that on your off time. Like when I'm sleeping?
It's deeply ironic.
Kind of, but anyway.
It's a tangle. It's such a tangle.
Yeah.
But I do it's interesting to bring capitalism into it too, because I think that relates to creativity in terms of cycles, because it's like, well, you're at your day job working all the time, teaching kids, or whatever someone does, and then they come home and their true desire is to make this thing, and there's not enough energy to do it. There's some artists throughout history who were superhuman. I've met some of these people and they're miraculous. They can make under any circumstances. But I think for most of us, there's need for time, there's need for family, there's need for eating, there's need for sleeping, and you can't just launch into your wild imaginative practice in those moments. So there's that cycle to living in capitalism that's very complicated and difficult and painful.
Yeah. Can't we all live in the 24th century, like in Star Trek Next Generation?
I was gonna bring up Star Trek in this interview, because I feel at the end, because of your question, like about sci-fi and stuff, and it just feels like Star Trek is so good at designing many different sci-fi futures to try on. They're constantly being like, oh, we're at this planet now, and like, look at this society that's been built, and whatever is part of that society. And I'm always just like, another great idea. Sometimes it's terrible. Sometimes it's terrible too, and something huge explodes or whatever,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't do this one. So I put a quote from this poet, but it really should go with the next question. Oh no, it kind of goes with both. Okay.
Cool.
So the poet, I don't know this poet, but I got this out of a book, which is all about creativity and psychopathology. So poet Antonin Artaud said, quote, "No one has ever written, painted, sculpted, modeled, built, or invented except to literally get out of hell." End quote. So the two questions that kind of go with that: why do people create, and are creative people mad? Are we insane?
I love that question.
So you can run with either one or both.
Yeah, I think, I mean,
I guess it depends on the definition of, crazy, but
yeah. Well, the crazy question, I'd love to address that, and I have lots of thoughts about craziness, and have sort of worked through my own craziness around being an artist, being possessed by making work, and the difficulty of combining creative life with normal home life and things like that. But to answer to start with the first question, is it why do we create? Yeah. Why do we create? I think artists create. I'm just going to talk about artists for a second, and we can go to the other C's in a moment or something. But I think people who are possessed by inspiration create because it's the only thing they can do to relieve the inspiration in a certain way. For me, this is definitely true, and I know lots of people that this is true for. The energy will not let up until the thing is made. For me, this is often comes out in terms of recording music, and I cannot stop working on the song until it is where it needs to be. Not necessarily in the sense of it being perfect or becoming the exact thing I imagined, but I know when it's right, and I know when it's not right. And if I leave it in the state of being not right, I can't sleep, and I can't put it out. I can't let other people hear it. So I think there is a certain possession that occurs, and I don't mean this in some sort of demonic way or something, but there is a genuine kind of overwhelm that occurs to people who create and are touched by inspiration, are filled with inspiration. That's why I think we create on a sort of individual level. I think culturally speaking, I think we create because there is a sort of collective dream that's coming to fruition. And it's very strange, especially at this point in history, to watch the collective dream unfolding, because it is so unwieldy. I mean, I suppose it's always been unwieldy throughout history, but at this particular moment, with the level of technology we have and whatnot, it's very, very strange and wild to see that collective dream unfolding. We need something new. We're calling for something new to happen. And it's slowly coming to fruition from many different angles. It's it's almost impossible to talk about this in sort of a limited sort of way, because it's so expansive and wild. But yeah. I also suddenly, this quote from Erykah Badu popped into my head to talk about why we make music in particular, why we make music. She said, the kids need the bass. Like, they need the bass drum, like they need the kick drum, they need like the power of the sound. Now, I don't know precisely why kids need the power of the sound, but there's something there. And so I think visionary artists like her, or Sun Ra, or many other wonderful visionary artists can sort of sense that there's something in the unconscious coming to fruition, and they know they need to bring it to others. And if they can identify that and bring it to others, that's also why they create.
Excellent. Do I hear music coming from somewhere?
Oh, it's they're wind chimes.
Oh, well then I was going to say, can you turn that off, please?
Totally. I can take them down if it would be better.
No. If it's just wind chimes, I love wind chimes.
Okay, cool.
Those aren't copyrighted.
They'll just be part of my part of the movie. They'll just be.
Yeah. So do you want to tackle our creative people mad?
Oh, I forgot about that.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I do. I would say creative people are sometimes mad. I don't think always. Creative people aren't always mad, and madness does not always necessarily come with being an artist. I think if an artist is not able to make what they need to make, or have the space they need to make what they need to make, they'll sometimes become a little mad. But I often think, and for me, I guess madness is stepping, when you're so deep in your work that you step over the edge into another landscape, psychic landscape, that is really different from this one. It's really different from our sort of collective enterprise. I think sometimes those people will take on an aura of madness. There's also so much projection coming at artists from the collective that says that artists are mad because they're different and have visions and can see things in such a new way, such an unexpected way. But I think our idea that all artists are mad is really, really way off. Really way off. Also, I don't always think that madness is a negative thing. I think some people who go mad, as long as they're not being destroyed from within or from without by society, like people who must make their work and can't support themselves because their art is not capable of being a product. That's a type of madness that I find really disturbing and terrible. But artists that I think can get near the edge of what everyone expects are in really interesting territory and are sometimes still a little mad, but they can come back and do ordinary things too. So this is all to say, I think there is a grand spectrum of madness when it comes to creatives. And I think there hasn't been nearly enough research about this. I think, the Beats talk about this in kind of an interesting way, like madness.
The who does, I'm sorry?
The Beats, like the San Francisco, like the writers of the San Francisco 50s and early 60s, like Allen Ginsberg and William Burroughs and Gary Snyder and other poets, Diane DePrima, who talked about madness as a really beautiful thing. Like for an artist to be mad meant that they were filled with energy and willing to create with their life in a powerful and transformative way, with a vision coming from elsewhere that is channeled through the body. So, there are definitions of madness that are beautiful too.
Can you say one thing again?
Called mad. Sure.
I'm sorry, could you repeat? Because when you said channeled through the body, it kind of went through the body. It did like a weird.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Just say channeled through the body.
Well, kind of the last sentence or two that you said.
Sure.
If you can remember, especially the ones I just talked about.
I think I can, yeah. So there are some very positive and beautiful definitions of madness, like in the sense of if someone is mad, they are in touch with this cosmic energy that's channeled through the body.
Excellent. Okay. It's funny. You say things and I'm like, oh, I want to tell them about something. And then you keep talking. I'm like, oh, now what was it? Anyway, some things that have reminded me, there's only 2 more questions left, but
cool.
Do you know the Sherman Brothers from Disney?
No.
The guys that wrote basically all the music for Disneyland. They wrote the music for
Oh, interesting.
Peter Pan and
No.
Jungle
No.
Book and all the all the movies from basically the 50s and 60s of Disney.
Yeah.
So they were brothers. And one of the brothers, he tells this story in a documentary where he said, when I knew that I was going to be a musician, as I was walking down the street in New York, and I heard a song. And I said, that's a really good song. Where is that coming from? And he kept going around the block, trying to find out where the song was coming from.
Yeah.
And he would ask people on the street, and they didn't hear anything. And he realized the song was from his head.
Gives me a chill.
And he was like, okay, now I need to write that down. And now I need to be a musician.
Yes, totally.
Very cool.
I love that.
Yeah. And also, I like that you use the word possession in terms of inspiration, because I feel the same way.
Yeah.
And you said maybe nothing demonic about it. And yet, remember, the daemon is kind of the idea of this like creative spirit that lived in your studio that would like help you out with ideas. So it's that idea is still there.
Well, and I buy the idea of the daemon, and yeah, it's just hard to talk about sometimes because people have such an association with the word demon that it's just hard to talk about. So sometimes I avoid it, but I'm glad you're saying that.
Well, what's her name? Elizabeth Gilbert, the woman that wrote Eat, Pray, Love.
Yeah.
She does an amazing TED Talk on that. I'll
really?
send it to you. And I hope to I'm going to contact them and ask them if I can use a clip from her video.
Yeah.
But
you should do a TED Talk, I think.
Oh, someday, maybe. If they ask me, sure.
I think you could do a really good TED Talk.
If they ask me. So the idea of the daemon, that's Greek, right?
Right.
When the Romans got to it, their word for the daemon was genius.
Right.
Your genius was the spirit that lived in your studio. And of course, the genius became, you are a genius.
Right. It became individualized. Yeah.
So.
Right. Totally. Well, yeah, I think, I was talking to my friend Eliza, who's one of my readers on my dissertation, and she was talking about Prince, the musical artist, and like how Prince was just on fire all the time. Like, and he would organize these shows at his house, and he'd have his limo driver go pick up random people downtown and like bring them back to his house. And then he would perform for like 10 people. And so, Eliza was talking about it in the sense of like his genius just was alive all the time. It didn't matter if he was in front of a crowd of 10,000 people or 10. And so that's a really interesting thought, like that it can follow you around and like zap you all the time, kind of, to use Jeffrey Kripal's phrase, like, to be zapped by the daemon. I feel very zapped by the daemon, and I feel like I'm allowing that energy to take up more space in my life. Because when I was younger, it was very hard for me to claim the title of artist, or to acknowledge that creativity was so central to my life that it could not be ignored. But I think it did, though I've taken breaks from actively being an artist in the world, it has just always been there and just always been pushing, and I really don't think it will ever go away. Like, it's so powerfully strong. And it's such a genius. Like, it comes up with such incredible ideas and such left field modes of creating and interacting and writing and so many things.
Totally. Before the last two questions, the other thing about artists and madness. So this book, I'm trying to get a hold of the woman. She's very difficult. She's a medical doctor at Johns Hopkins University. And apparently she's getting, up there in age and may not respond to people anyway. That's what I've been told by somebody else who was in their 70s. They're like, yeah, I tried to contact her about 20 years ago for something. She never got back to me. Okay. But she wrote the book Touched with Fire, and it's about creativity and psychopathology.
Yeah.
And she looks at, the seasons of when people created, like what points of the year are people more productive. She looked at the lifespan of an artist. When were they productive? It seems to go in 10-year cycles.
Interesting.
Like a year or two of super intense creativity, and then 5 to 10 years of fallow, right?
Wow.
Very interesting. And she looked at kind of the main thrust of the book is, are creative people crazy? But it was, do creative people have manic depression?
Huh.
And she basically comes down on, yes, maybe creative people are more, what's the word I want to say?
Prone.
More prone, thank you. They're more prone to it.
Yeah.
But most creatives don't have manic depression.
Right.
What they kind of have is somewhere in between normal and manic depression. Somewhere in between there is something I've never seen it anywhere else, but she calls it hypomania.
Wow.
HYPO mania.
Yeah.
And it's basically like viewing reality the way that a normal person would view it, but heightened and expansive.
Yeah.
And then this other professor, this one guy I talked to, and I told him, I might use so many quotes out of your book. Maybe I'll just make you one of the writers on this movie. And he was like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, totally.
He talks about, we're taught, and this kind of attacks public education, which I don't really care for, but, we're taught to categorize, especially in the West. Everything is this, or it's this, not that. So people are very attuned to that, but artists have a lower affective filter. So we see connections everywhere.
Yeah.
That other people don't.
Oh yeah.
And that's kind of where he came down on. So I thought that was interesting. And the other interesting thing before the other questions is question 2, are creative people mad? It seems to me, and I haven't interviewed, 10,000 people. I've interviewed less than 20. But it seems to be most people that aren't creative think creative people are crazy.
Yeah.
And most people that are creatives, they look at their creativity and they say, no, that is my art. That's my therapy.
Right.
I would be crazy if I didn't have that outlet.
Right. Totally.
So I think that's very interesting.
Yeah, that is really interesting. Yeah, that it allows some people who might go off the rails to not go off the rails because they have a sense of clarity about what they should do. And it probably also, for those people, also is just really soothing. I wonder if the nervous system is soothed by making art. I wonder what neurobiologists have to say about this. But that's fascinating and beautiful. Yeah, because actually it's I'm glad you bring that up. I know a lot of people that isn't true for, I don't know very many people who are because I make this, I feel better. I know a lot of people who are I'm making this and I'm losing it.
Okay.
And that's just
I'm making this and I'm losing it.
That's just my little subset of the world, is I have people around who are like that, but who are committed to it and are this is my life and I'm struggling to do it and I can't make enough money and things like that. But it's beautiful that art itself is therapy. It's definitely true, and in my practice sometimes has been literally true. I'm making something and then I feel better. I know when I complete a piece of work, I always feel better, and I feel like I've done a part of my work in the world. But I have a tendency to think about things like that. I'm a Sagittarius, and to me it's always kind of big picture stuff.
Nice.
I guess I don't have anything really articulate to say about artist therapy, but I think,
Okay.
but just a note, like, I think the people who can go into the deep and bring something beautiful out through their creative practice often soothe lots and lots of other people too, which is really interesting.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Excellent. So last two questions here. Does creativity have anything to do with evolution?
Definitely. I love this question. Creativity has everything to do with evolution, I think. Without the creative push, I doubt anything would change. I have a suspicion that every big change that occurs in someone's life or in their community or in their family or in the culture is pushed by creativity towards that. Now, I sort of feel like this returns to the mystery of creativity. We don't know where that's coming from necessarily or where it is necessarily going, but you can feel it in these moments of, I was listening to some protesters chant just yesterday walking down the street, and it was like it was a little far away, and it was sort of like an incantation floating over the yards towards me. But it really felt like a moment of like, there's something creative happening here. Like, it's coming through, and it's this very primal expression just coming out. So in that sense, like, it comes, it affects, and it makes some sort of change. There's some connection there. Sun Ra had this idea called the alter destiny. He thought that the people of planet Earth were on the wrong path, as evidenced by enslavement and poverty and all sorts of awful things that he was witnessing in his life. But he said it could be changed. Like, we could move towards a different future, which he called the alter destiny. And this would come to fruition through creativity, through music and people receiving music and artwork. Culture itself, like the machinations of culture made by culture makers, artists and creatives, could alter where we are going. So in that sense, there's a very direct connection, though some of those connections might be a little tenuous. There's, by making something with the creative force, things do change. So there is evolution is encouraged through creativity.
Excellent. Sorry if you can see me moving around.
Yeah, you were kind of
back
like, oh.
Sorry, the way I'm sitting, my lower back is killing me.
Oh no.
That's okay. It's killing me all the time.
Oh.
Speaking of which, right before I get to the last question, where the heck are my questions now? Oh, there. You said much earlier, like, a little madness is okay as long as you're not destroying, like, yourself or other people.
Yeah.
So, you know, it hasn't been in the last 2 years with COVID and stuff, but I used to meet with this group of my teaching colleagues at lunch every day.
Yeah.
Same, like 4 or 5 guys. And one of the guys is he's a math teacher, but he loves music. You know, he'll tell you every Beatles and Dylan concert he went to and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And this was around the time when Tom Petty died, when he OD'd. And they were talking about it, and they talked to me, and they're like, so Andrew, like, why do creative people keep dying? And I said, well, not to get too heavy on you, but you know, there's a fine line between creativity and destruction.
Sure, that's
and
a good point.
It goes to Jung, like, if you're all one-sided in creativity, you're building up destruction.
Right.
At some point, it's going to get you. Like,
Totally.
And also, you need, you know, if you're in the creative on phase so much, on your down phase, that's usually when people use drugs. That's when you use alcohol. You need something to like inure you.
Yeah, yeah.
Not really sure where I'm going with that, but
no, that makes a lot of sense to me, and it's really interesting stuff. It's making me think of a lot of different things, but yeah, I think well, to return to the possession idea, like if you are in an on phase, a creative phase where it's just flowing through you and it won't stop, and you're working constantly for weeks on something, and you're not eating, and you're not sleeping, and you're not bathing, and you're not having meaningful connections with others, and you know, all of these, having downtime, having time to like clear your mind, then you start to get really out of balance. And I think that a lot of artists, because the thing comes for them with such intensity, they're like, they forget. I mean, this used to happen to me a lot. I would just be in my studio working on something, and suddenly it was 12 hours later and I hadn't eaten or drank any water. And then your organism starts to be like, what are you doing? So I think that happens to a lot of people. In terms of the drug thing, or, you know, someone when they are coming down from having done a lot of intense work, like getting into drugs or alcohol or something. I mean, a lot of those chemicals like are for dampening the intensity. I used to smoke cigarettes for that. It really helped me to like, for the intensity of the way that the inspiration and the energy was sort of rattling my frame, I could sort of smoke it away, and it would sort of push it down, and I'd have a moment of calm. That of course creates addiction. So I think for a lot of for you know, those people who are wondering why do artists like keep dying of
OD, you know,
or ODing or whatever, being an artist is a very intense thing. It's a very intense thing to be given, to be handed, to be charged with being, which is, I think most people who aren't creatives don't realize the weight of this, and the sort of immensity of being a maker, and how cosmic it really is. It's like, if you don't go through it, you're like, of course people are like, artists are crazy because they're experiencing something so intense and often painful. So,
yeah. Well, here's how I see it. I see it as like, and when I say fire, I mean like Promethean fire.
Sure.
Or like,
that's a beautiful way to put it.
So like being a creative is as if, to use Jungian terminology, it's as if you're visited by a god and they give you a lightning bolt and say, here, hold this for me.
Literally.
And it's going to, it's going to shock you. It's going to do stuff to you.
Right. And I think part of the task of being a healthy artist is to be handed a lightning bolt and figure out how to contain that energy. Where does it live in your life, and how do you create some distance from it, or hold it out while you eat your eggs in the morning, you know, so that it's not burning you alive. I think that's a huge task, and it's something that not everybody makes it around to doing. I was just listening to this Neil Young album I really love this morning, because I needed like a taste of something really earthy feeling. So I was listening. He's got this album, Tonight's the Night. Do you know that one?
Mm-mm. I don't know Neil Young well.
Well,
it should. I know Rockin' Out in the Free World.
Right, totally. Well, I mean, obviously Neil Young is no Dylan, but like
he's in there, you know.
Yeah, he's not as much of a poet. You know, Dylan is such an eminent songsmith, but Neil Young writes really honest songs that are sometimes boring, but sometimes really wonderful. And this album, Tonight's the Night, he and his band recorded it like in this music hall where they just rolled up this truck with all this recording equipment. And it's really like lo-fi almost, and like the singing is like, what is going on? And but anyway, there's this song where he's singing really sadly about how he just wants to be alone, and he's just so tired of being a musician and so tired of being a rock star, but he's obviously like frazzled and just so burnt, like he's burnt out. And he's almost just like, I'm holding up the lightning bolt. I know it's my job. I know this is what I'm supposed to do, but I just need to get to like New Mexico and be in the desert and be free for a moment from the public persona that comes along with being a creative person.
You know what that reminds me of?
What?
It's interesting that like being in touch with creativity made him want to go to the desert.
Yeah, totally.
The idea of the, all the Abrahamic faiths.
Yeah.
Yahweh is a God of the desert.
Yeah.
Abraham met God in the desert. Jesus met God in the desert. Muhammad met God in the desert.
The desert is where you meet God. Yeah.
So to me, I'm like, oh, Neil Young is tired of holding this creative thing. He wants to go back to the desert to give it back.
That's brilliant, Andy. Yeah, totally. He wants to go give it. He does. He literally wants to give it back.
Yeah.
I have had experiences of the desert, of going to the desert, and I never want to give the lightning bolt back now. I'm keeping the lightning bolt forever, personally, because I feel like I'm not like famous or something, and so like destroyed by this. Like it's the lightning bolt. I've found a way to take the lightning bolt and put it into a little bell jar in my room, in my studio, and I can take it out whenever I need to like get zapped. But then I can like put it in my studio, or in terms of like, for me, the music is always here and it's always like asking to be made. But I can sort of go like, it's okay, we're gonna do that tomorrow. Like I sort of make a deal with it. I'm like, tomorrow's our day to be in the studio. Today we need to do house stuff. We need to make some money. We need to, do some chores. I need to return these phone calls. And then tomorrow we're gonna just jam all day. And then the song is like, okay, I can deal till then. So I think having that kind of relationship with God's lightning bolt, like, you have to, as an artist, you're like, I've got a lightning bolt, I'm getting struck all the time. You sort of have to know that and kind of make peace with that. But there are ways to temper it and to work with it, to be the sort of yin to its yang.
Totally. I want to get to the last question here, but I have something else to say about what you said.
Great.
So going back to the Elizabeth Gilbert TED Talk about inspiration and stuff, she tells a story about she talked to Tom Waits at one point, and he said he told her there was one time where he could hear a song come at him like from the sky while he's driving. And he apparently got very mad and said, wait a minute, totally. I'm driving here.
Totally.
If you want to come into reality, come back another time.
Totally.
And it did. But I like that. It's like, wait a minute. Go away.
It's so inconvenient sometimes when the inspiration strikes. And the car has been a place where a lot of my songs have been written. And actually, about a year and a half ago, I heard a song coming from the sky in a really similar style to the way Tom Waits did, and I pulled over because I was like, I have to write this down or something. And I started writing. All I had was my phone to collect the songs, so I was typing texts to myself of the lyrics, and I started typing and I didn't stop for an hour and a half, and it wrote the whole album. And it was just like, boom, there it is. So
that's awesome.
That's the beauty and the grace of the lightning bolt.
On my drives to Pacifica, and especially on my drive home, would be 5 hours.
Yeah.
I would write papers, talk to text while I'm driving. Many of my papers were written that way.
You're a genius. That's some genius. Yeah.
All right, here, the last question. How do you see creativity helping us, meaning humanity, in the future?
I really want to answer this well.
We could always come back for a secondary interview or something if it's
Sure. Well, this is really
if
fun.
you really want to like have something written and you can just read it or something. I don't know.
Right.
It's up to you.
Totally. No, I'm gonna trust the genius to bring it. How do I see creativity helping us in the future as humanity, like as a society?
Mm-hmm.
I think if we can trust in creativity, that there's something beautiful in it. I think beauty's part of it. If we can trust creativity, that it is trying to engender a more beautiful, connective, interpersonal society, then I think it will provide. I'm saying this from a very personal place of like, I can find some of this trust. I think because creativity has been so shadowed, it's difficult for society to say, I think we should trust in creativity, but I really think we should. I think part of creativity is discernment. If you're a creative person and you are discerning, you can tell what works and what doesn't work, what's healthy and what's not healthy. You can create boundaries that are at once functional and provide. Beauty can be released. To speak of Star Trek again,
Please.
You know, when in the Next Generation they talk about the past, and they talk about the 21st century, and they talk about how terrible things sort of were, and how the world was coming to sort of this apocalyptic apex. What saves them is creativity. Like they made creative choices in order to alter the world. And every time they talk about that in the show, I feel some hope. I mean, obviously it's fantasy, it's fiction, but there are so many when I'm in my best mode, when I'm in my optimistic mode about things like climate change and other existential threats, I'm reminded how tremendously creative humans are. We have invented absolutely mind-blowing technologies, artworks, ways of communicating, psychologies. I mean, the list is endless. And we trust in that in as much as it serves us capitalistically. Like we trust creativity, you know, society does anyway. We trust creativity in as much as it can make us money. But I feel committed to the idea that creativity can move mountains, and does. It heals people. It alters reality. It saves things that need to be saved. And it destroys when it needs to destroy. Which is, you know, there's some contradictions in there that are important. But I think trusting in creativity is maybe the most important thing we could do in this moment. And trusting that what it brings will be beautiful, supportive, and just what's needed. I don't know what the world's going to look like, but it's definitely, I mean, I have a lot of faith in our kids. I'll just say that, you know, I have faith in our kids. I'm about to have a kid too, obviously. And I have faith that they're going to have consciousness like we have never experienced before. Obviously your kids are already with us, and I'm sure they're mind-blowing in so many ways. Coming up in a world with the internet, That alone is just totally wild to me. Because I remember before it existed.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's like, anyway, I could go on and on about that.
I'm picturing something like, and maybe this is good or bad, I don't know, but like, oh, with technology, you know, think like, also, this was restated by, there's a physicist named Michio Kaku, or Michio Ikaku. Anyway, but he talks about, he's like, telepathy, we've pretty much already got it, but we're going to definitely have it pretty soon. You know, the second that your phone is like integrated in your body, you just think and you'll text somebody. So I'm thinking like, oh, what if our generation our kids' generation like makes some like world neural net, and then we have the creative capacity of 7, or maybe by then like 10 billion people attacking problems. Like, wouldn't that be interesting?
Right.
For better or worse, I don't know if would a hive mind be better or worse. I don't know.
Well,
but
there's an image of that from Star Trek, which is the Borg,
that's a very dark image of it. But
that's the dark side of what you're talking about. But it would be. It's hard for me not to go to the dark side with that thought. But I have some friends who are like very sci-fi oriented, and they're just like, the internet is the most beautiful, useful, and healing tool that we have. Some of them, you know, my friend Lale definitely thinks that. So I don't know. I love that you say we have telepathy already and it's only becoming more efficient. I think that's really articulate. Yeah, Jeffrey Kripal talks about that in terms of books too. He says books are telepathy because it's like you're reading someone else's thoughts from another place, right, in your house or wherever you are. So there's
it's very delayed telepathy.
It's very right.
Like, oh, I read this book that was written 100 years ago.
Totally, yeah. It's also time travel in that sense.
Oh yeah.
But what I hear you saying and what fills me with hope is there's connection, actual genuine connection in which problems are solved, and there's creative action between people. And that seems like something that we really need. And that's, I mean, people always, you know, I've got my whole like ask me about telepathy kind of thing that I did for a long time. And the thing that kept returning for me around telepathy was that telepathy is actually a sort of a form of love. If love is a form of communication in which two people come to understand each other better. So I hope for the future that there is a deeper sense of connection that is joined to creativity. That's my hope. I think it's happening. There's a lot of creativity taking place, and there's a lot of difficulty too, but I don't think the difficulty is insurmountable. That's my hunch.
I like it. I like everything you've said. I kept waiting, like, he's going to add a bit more.
I had more to say. I was professing.
Well, no, sometimes I interject, and there was one guy I was interviewing, and like every time I like went like that, his mic would shut off.
Sure.
At least on my end, that's what it sounded like. And I'm like, shit, I don't want that to be ruining somebody's answer. So cool. Thank you so much for doing this. I wish we could do it live, but you know, that would be a plane ride for me and all sorts of stuff. But
yeah, well, maybe if maybe it'll really take off. I love this idea. I feel so honored to be included, and it seems like such a rich, beautiful project. So
yeah, I feel like it's maybe more. It's more like a series than it is a one movie. But I got to start somewhere. So
yeah, this could be on Netflix someday.
There you go. Maybe. Who knows?
Yeah.
That'd be great.
So wonderful. Well, thanks for this opportunity and the great interview and all your really thoughtful comments and thoughts and questions and everything.
Likewise.
Yeah.
All right, dude.
All right. Talk to you soon, Andy. Be in touch.
All right. Talk to you later.
Okay. Talk to you later. Bye.
Telepathy is real, and I can feel you in my bones. Your thoughts are in the air, and they're landing in my mouth, converging from all directions. The energy is at home. Words from a long lost conversation, a fleeting and reborn. Telepathy is real, and electric lines of light are traversing vast dimensions and appearing in my sight. In books, TV, and movies, the messages come through. Strange vast potentials are planted in your room. From under the stairs, it's all coming to you. Staring into space or a stranger's face, you can read the proof. Telepathy is real, and I'm hearing you from the vast belly of blackness. Your reality comes through.
And like I said, I'll also send you appearance release and
Cool.
obviously a material release for songs. I definitely want Telepathy is Real is like one of my favorite songs.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Not just like that you've written, but like one of like I listen to it quite often.
Oh, Andy, that's so sweet.
I'm serious. It's great.
I'm so glad you love it.